We'll start on page 40. Actually, the second paragraph down. We do not know any more of the trials the youthful traveler passed through at this stage of the pilgrimage. On the third day, he reached Tehri, on his way to Gangotri, a glacier and also known as the source of the Ganga. He came to Darasu. Here he took the hilly path through a forest infested with wild beasts in order to reach Yamunotri, the source of the Yamuna River, in 2 days. Fortunately, he met a party of hillmen who took him up to Jambadagni, Niji Mokam, and from there he followed the course of the Yamuna in the company of 2 sadhus, one a Vaishnava and the other a Naga. The only fare for pilgrims on this route was ordinary boiled herbs and seeds of wild grass. Gangadhar was fortunate in having the 2 holy men for companions, as they shared with him their food. The last village on the way to Yamunotri was Karashali. The poor Pandas, the local priests, were here engaged to become their guides over the difficult terrain. The path became almost impassable, and they could advance only by holding on to the boughs of the burja trees which lined the route. Now you can imagine this on the side of a cliff, hanging onto bushes as you're skinnying along the side of the cliff. At last they reached their destination, the source of the Yamuna. As Gangadhar, in his innermost soul, realized the Himalayas to be the symbol of his own chosen ideal, his heart was filled with divine bliss. Later, he expressed his feelings. It was here that I first saw the rays of the setting sun turning the perpetual snows of the Himalayas into bright gold. At sunset, the tops of the snow peaks seemed to have become all gold. The beauty of the scene beggars description, and it is not possible for me to paint it in words. Part of the peaks were silver white and part were bright gold. The 2 together reminded me of the union of Shiva and Parvati, whose combined bodies are half the color of the yellow champaka flower and half of white camphor. The 3 monks dined on rice and pulses cooked in the hot spring of Yamunotri. They spent the night in a warm cave there, and the next day Gangadhar went on alone to Uttarkashi, traveling through a dense forest which was haunt of wild animals. At Uttarkashi, a Tibetan merchant told him that, after seeing Badrinarayan, he might go on to Tibet by way of the Niti Pass, visiting Kailash and Manasa Savar on the way. A day or 2 was spent at the well-known place of pilgrimage, and then the pilgrims started for the village of Batuhari on the way to Gangotri. Gangotri means the mouth of the birthplace of the Ganga. It was almost dark when, a mile below Batuhari, he found an ailing pilgrim on the narrow hill track. He felt something had to be done for the helpless, dying sannyasin, but there was little likelihood of meeting any traveler at nightfall. To his astonishment, however, a brahmacharan suddenly appeared, and when requested, silently carried the sannyasin's belongings to a habitation. The sannyasin was much taller than Gangadhar, who slowly got him on his feet and handed him his long staff. Gangadhar held him up by the waist, but after going a short distance, the sannyasin collapsed and narrowly escaped falling down into a deep gorge. He lay on the ground in a light drizzle. It was about 3 hours past sunset. The villagers gave the travelers no help whatsoever. Gangadhar sold his only blanket and hired a porter to carry the sannyasin to his khandi. In his khandi, which is a chair used to carry people over the hills. carry the sannyasin in his kandi to the village rest house. It was then midnight. For one night and one day he nursed the sick pilgrim, enduring many difficulties, including the curses of the Nagas assembled there, but to no avail. After performing the last rites for the sannyasin, he resumed his journey to Gangotri. On the lonely and treacherous mountain path, Gangadhar lost his way at a place called Bhairavjola, and then continued his journey along the bank of the Bhagirathi, which would lead him to the Gangotri. As he drew near to Gangotri, his natural devotion for the Ganga increased. His pen best describes the scene. As I approached Gangotri, the grandeur of the Himalayas came into view before me. In front was a huge ice-clad mountain from which the Bhagirathi flows down to purify the three worlds, heaven, earth, and the nether regions. The holy river rushes, serpent-like, down its tortuous course with a ceaseless and deafening roar of Hara-Hara. The riverbed at Gangotri is rather narrow, and the current is much too swift for even 100 Aravatas. That is the name for elephant, the king of gods, to stand against it for a moment. The ice-clad mountain tops stand in magnificent contrast to the dark green deodars at their feet. The banks at places are of shining white rock and look like natural altars. Their unearthly beauty is impossible to describe, and I lost myself completely amidst this wealth of beauty. Watching the ceaseless dance of the holy waters of the Ganga, he stood enchanted, for it seemed to him that he had come to the abode of the gods, far above the world of men. Night was coming on, and the solitary paths of the Himalayas would soon be hidden in darkness. Gangadhar, who looked to God alone for help, was fast losing consciousness of the external world. An indescribable feeling was overpowering him. Just then a sadhu, traveling that way, noticed his condition, and with brotherly affection took him along with him. Thus, Gangadhar's long-cherished desire to visit Gangotri and to touch its holy water was fulfilled, and he was overcome with joy. Some distance from Gangotri, on the way to Gomukh, Gangadhar came across a Brahmin in a pleasant cave doing penance. He was a Vanapastri, a forest recluse. His stock of food was exhausted. But as his period of penance was not yet over, he had been fasting for 2 days. Gangadhar retraced his steps to Gangotri and bought from a merchant ample stock of food for the Brahmin. Gangadhar spent a joyful week at this solitary place beside Gangotri. He took a phial of the holy water for the Baranagar monastery and set off for Uttarkashi. The Brahmin was reluctant to part company and followed him for some distance along the way. At Uttarkashi, Gangadhar suffered from diarrhea, and not wishing to inconvenience anyone, removed himself to a solitary rock by the river outside the village. He remained there for 2 days with the water of the Ganga for medicine, and Narayan is his physician, and Narayan, God himself. On the 3rd day, he felt somewhat better, but then came the pinch of hunger. He desired to eat some rice flavored with lemon. Hardly had the thought crossed his mind when a handsome youth in a shabby dress appeared before him. He asked Gangadhar if he would accompany him to his village. When he heard of Gangadhar's illness and the suffering he had just undergone, he shed tears of sympathy. Gangadhar wondered who this youth was and how he came when most needed. The noble young man took Gangadhar to his hut and looked after him till he was well again. He was eager to continue his journey, but when his host wished that he should stay a little longer, he departed for Terry after 3 or 4 days. Sad to see him leave, the young man accompanied him for some distance. Gangadhar, grateful for the timely help, offered a gift of warm clothing to the young man, then quickly went away. At Terry, he dispatched to his brothers at the monastery the vial of Ganga water taken at Gangotri, the receipt of which would make known to them his whereabouts. Before he could fully recover his health, the strenuous climbing in the hills brought on another attack of hill diarrhea. He was again restored to health by the care of a Brahmin youth. He had parted with his woolen wrapper at Uttarkashi and now wore only a coarse woolen tunic. Fortunately, the chief priest of the Terry prince presented him with a blanket. The Terry priest, I don't know. His next goal was Chandravadani Pita. The path to it lay through a dense forest. The temple of the goddess stood on the crest of a mountain of exceptional beauty. The king of the mountains, as it were, takes pride in holding the temple of the Mother of the Universe on his head, while nature herself makes daily reverential offerings of fruit and flowers. The climb up was very steep. Gangadhar lost his way and, strangely enough, found himself on the other side of the mountain. By the grace of the goddess, however, he reached the temple at sunset. He later described his feelings on reaching the temple. As you reach here, you feel that the universe has taken a sacred vow of silence. From the limitless stretches of untraversed snow in the north, an effulgent flood of light illuminates the world. Oh, what a mass of heavenly beauty has been consecrated in these perpetual snows. Here everything is stillness, undisturbed. The whole universe seems to be in deep meditation of the infinite. 2 nights were spent in great joy at the temple of the goddess, and Gangadhar prayed to the mother that he might return again. On the way down, he lost his way once more and was in real danger. He could neither go down nor climb up the steep mountainside. He had never dreamt of such a danger before, but he remained calm and thought to himself, "This place belongs to the mother, and wherever I sit, I am on her lap." After a while, crying victory to the mother, he began to descend as chance dictated. At any moment, he was in danger of sliding to the plain below. However, he came down safely and approached some peasants who were eating fried wheat. The sight of a sadhu coming down in that manner had filled them with wonder. "Where do you come from? No one ever comes down this way. Surely the goddess Chandravadani held your hand as you came down," they exclaimed. Gangadhar had his breakfast with him, and after a little rest, continued on his way through the forest. Soon he reached the highway to Srinagar in Garhwal. The town was unusually crowded with pilgrims. 5 long months had passed since he had last been among so many people. He bathed in the Annadananda and went to the Kamaleshwara temple and monastery there. The abbot gave him a blanket, as again he was without one. There were Sanskrit pundits at Srinagar and Gangadhar read with pleasure a manuscript copy of the Avaduta Gita, which he obtained from one of them. 2 or 3 days later, he set off for Kedarnath via Rudraprayag on the Mandakini. He reached the charming valley of Agastya Muni at noon, bathed in the heavenly Mandakini, and visited the temple. While he sat in the temple, he began to think that though he had found great joy in seeing holy places associated with the great sages of old, what would be his joy if he could actually see some of those saints? Just then there came to the temple a sadhu with a smiling face, his body besmeared with ashes, his only covering a loincloth. He invited Gangadhar to have his meal with him. Later, while they were traveling together, there grew between them a feeling of mutual love and regard, and Gangadhar was struck by the sadhu's great love for God. When the sadhu was meditating, Gangadhar noticed that his beaming face was lit with a heavenly smile. At Gupta Kashi, Gangadhar was charmed to find him in a blissful mood. He covered the saint's naked body with his blanket. Later the sadhu told him, "Kedarnath, out of his grace, has blessed me by appearing to me even here. So what need is there for me to go to Kedar?" At Fadachadi near Gupta Kashi, there was a Bengali sannyasin who had been to Kailash and Manasa Sovar. On hearing that he had gone to Okimat on the hill just opposite of Gupta Kashi, Gangadhar at once proceeded there and learned from him the route to Kailash in Tibet. He then met the abbot of Okimat. With the 2 rupees that a professor there gave him, he was able to procure a new blanket from the miserly abbot. Returning to Gupta Kashi, he had the pleasant surprise of meeting the Udasi sadhu with whom he had left home as a boy. The sadhus all they travel from holy place to holy place, so they run into each other here and there as they're visiting these pilgrimage places. Gangadhar traveled on from Gupta Kashi to Triyugi Narayan, where a fire has been kept burning for 3 yugas. Now, there's a footnote on this. 1 yuga is a cycle or world period. The 3 yugas are Satya, Treta, and Dwapara. So this has been kept burning for 3 yugas. He took some of the holy ashes and smeared his body with them. Thus he spent 2 nights by the sacred fire. As he viewed the silent Himalayan snow peaks in all their majesty from this picturesque mountain plateau, he thought that they rightly deserved the name given to them by the poet Kalidasa, the divine king of mountains. Later, on his way to Gaurikund, known for its hot springs, Gangadhar had a dip in the confluence of the deep Mandakini and the Kali Ganga, whose ice-cold waters removed the fatigue of the journey. Sitting at the confluence, he relaxed and leisurely followed in thought the playful dance of the holy rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, Mandakini, and Alaknanda, losing himself in the wonders of the Creator. In his mind's eye flashed the intrinsic spiritual nature of the Himalayas and the extraordinary influence of these rivers, the daughters of the Himalayas, on the course of history. He thought of the sanctity of the many places of pilgrimage that were washed by the waters of the Ganga and the Yamuna. As he approached Gaurikund, the glorious scenery captivated him, and he thought, if such be the region surrounding him, what must the monarch of mountains, Kedar himself, be like? He reached Gaurikund, the last pilgrim center on the way to Kedar. Of this place, Gangadhar wrote, "From what I have understood in my travels to these lonely and inaccessible places in the Uttarakhand, I can with full conviction say that all the incidences mentioned in the Leela of Shiva and Parvati took place in this domain of Kedar. The enchanting scenes of nature I saw, so full of her captivating presence, made me forget completely the sorrows of this fleeting life. Oh, the beauty and variety of the trees, densely laden with foliage and flowers, twigs and new leaves, rising in massive heaps, one above the other. The humming of bees drunken with honey, their bodies covered with pollen, the gentle sound of breezes carrying the fragrance of flowers, the songs of numerous birds, the beautiful mountain streams ceaselessly gurgling in their white, silvery forms, winding and turning in their hurried course, echoing hara hara. The tall trees growing up out of beds of wildflowers, and above all, the towering, ice-covered, golden mountains. Gaurikun's charms had been overpowering, but his great desire to see Keter made the traveler press on to Rambara after a night's rest. This was the last inn before Kedarnath. The scenery suddenly changed. The verdure of the forest was gone, and now only range after range of icy peaks rising into the sky were to be seen, with numberless streams running down from the mountains on all sides. Gangadhar would later explain. The same mountain expresses at times a variety of moods, or sometimes none at all. Such are the ways of the Creator. For the liberation of man, whose powers of the intellect are so limited, Brahman itself, though devoid of name and form and without qualities, has assumed the form of the mountain to open man's eyes to his extraordinary nature and powers. The traveler was overwhelmed to think of the glories of the Creator as well as of his formless nature. He saw the two inseparably united. In this mood, he proceeded towards Kedar. As he approached nearer to Kedarnath, his chosen deity, the cold increased. His mind was roaming, as it were, in the infinite. He was enveloped in the clouds that cover the mountain. He breathed a more rarefied atmosphere. Barefoot, he crossed over patches of snow and ice heaped up here and there. At last, in the middle of the Bengali month, Asadha, June-July, he reached his long-desired destination, Kedarnath. Those who go to Kedar in early Jaista, May, miss much of the charm of the Himalayas. Kedar is at its grandest after the rains have begun. That is why it has always been the customary practice to spend the month of Shravana, July-August, there. Step by step, Gangadhar advanced with feelings of joy and wonder in the direction of the temple. As soon as the glorious white peak of Kedar came into view, Gangadhar experienced an unusual mood, which he later described. As one burns one's eyes by looking at the sun, just so did it seem in my case. When I saw that huge, white, effulgent form, my mortal eyes were, as it were, blinded by its brightness. They could not bear to gaze upon that dazzling light for any length of time. But I saw with my inner eyes the eternally effulgent, self-evolved emblem of Mahadeva, the great God and teacher of the whole world. I clearly saw that this was no figment of the imagination, but reality itself. Nowhere in the Uttarakhand is such an expansive view of the Himalayas as at Kedar and Kailash. The traveler's unique experience at Kedar made him realize that the Himalaya is Shiva himself. It is the sporting ground of Shiva and Shakti. The myriad peaks are self-evolved emblems of Shiva himself in meditation. Here, Purusha and Prakriti, male and female principles, are at play. Gauri performed her penances here, and here Uma was united with Maheshwara. From his meditations at the foot of Kedar, Gangadhar became aware of ideas unknown to man and beyond man's imagination, ideas whose influence was inconceivable and unutterable. Who can tell how many such places exist in the Himalayas? Their immensity, beauty, and grandeur, their awe-inspiring nature, as well as their sweet and soothing influence, roused in the heart of the votary a sense of the greatness of Mahadev. It was with a spiritual eye that the traveler saw the Himalayas and wrote, "It is not in the power of man to realize the greatness of the holy abode where Mahamaya, the primal energy, is in eternal sport with Sadashiva, the great Purusha. It is in the Himalayas that Hara and Gauri, Purusha and Prakriti, have united. The grandeur of it all so overwhelmed me that I thought, as one cannot find a limit to Satchidananda, so also there is no limit to this monarch of mountains. It is the source of infinite forms and ideas expressing themselves in countless ways, so that I could never look upon it without seeing new forms of beauty appearing before my eyes." While he sat alone at the foot of Kedar enjoying the view, Gangadhar noticed that around the foot of the mountain and over the plain lay a carpet of green, delightfully decorated with flowers of every description. The sight was so captivating that he longed to see more of it. While he was gazing upon this sight, he merged his ego altogether in the infinite grandeur of the King of the Mountains, Paramatma, the Supreme Soul residing in the hearts, reveals its infinitude to ignorant man in this King of Mountains. Gangadhar had an exalted experience on this occasion. He described it in the following words. As we get a conception of the living form of Mahamaya, immanent in the world, by seeing her clay image, so did it strike me when I saw the huge form of this mountain, that it was the emblem of infinite bliss, Bhumananda. At the foot of that white towering mount of Kedar, Gangadhar saw in his mind's eye the loving form of his guru, the guru whose departure from this world only a few months back had created a void in his heart, and for whose sake he had renounced the worldly life and taken the vow to travel alone. It was Sri Ramakrishna who one day at Dakshineshwar showed the boy Gangadhar the living and conscious Shiva at the feet of Kali. It was he who had drawn Gangadhar in the garb of a traveler to this holy place in the far-off Himalayas, to help him realize the form of the formless. Gangadhar, the young yogi, lost in meditation on the God of gods, saw his chosen ideal immanent everywhere, and his heart was filled with an unbroken joy. So we'll stop there today. We're going to Tibet next week. And Saturday we will have the reading of the Gospel at 5 o'clock here in the temple. Sunday, Swami Vivekananda will give a talk. What is your philosophy? That sounds, his talks I find always interesting. He has them so they're very well thought out and logical. So what is your philosophy? The 12th of this month is Kali Puja down in Hollywood. And that's a night puja. I think it starts at 10 and goes most of the night. And that will be in person. I imagine it'll be on Zoom too. There'll be links to it. Any questions about what we have just read? Yes,
I
John.
do have a question. I really liked how immersed in nature his experience was, and I wanted to ask if you had heard of any reminiscences or had any encounters with other monks of the order who were nature mystics in that sense. I know Swami Ashokananda was very nature oriented. I don't know.
Well, yes. Yes, Ganga have met swamis of the order who are mystics, and yes, they have experienced things in nature. And I think you probably have too when you've gone to places that strike awe in your heart when you see them. I can think of the Grand Canyon the first time you look down into it. I can think of the first time you walk into Yosemite. There are many things that many people respond to nature that way. They see the grandeur and the greatness of the greatness of the creation so far beyond them. I'm not sure we would all say express it so clearly related to God. But that would be where our own mental place was. I think we would have the feeling and not know where to put it.
There's also in the gospel, Ramakrishna talks about the sadhu whose only spiritual discipline was to go to a waterfall and go, bravo,
Yes.
bravo.
Can you, Rajaprana just reminded me, in the gospel, the sadhu who went to a waterfall every day and just said, bravo, bravo, good job, well done. And that was his entire spiritual practice. So, yes, I mean, there are yeah. And there is something absolutely unbelievably magnificent about the Himalayas, the way they stretch, and they are so snow-covered. John, did you have a question?
Yes, just briefly, I think I have a good idea who Mahamaya is. Who is Mahapurusha?
Mahapurusha, the great god. Purusha is the male principle, and Prakriti is the female principle.
Okay. I had it then. I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? It's good to see you, Leanne, and it's good to see you, Elizabeth. I see Lito is there. Good to see your icon. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Take care, stay healthy, and have a good weekend.